With Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX out now, there's one huge change from the originals to the new game that was a little controversial. They completely took out the IQ skills in favor of rare qualities. For IQ skills in the original, you'd have to eat hundreds of gummies, and no, I'm not exaggerating, to obtain all of a Pokemon's IQ skills. These could range from going through walls to being able to throw items without enemies catching them, small things like that. In the new game, Rescue Team DX, these rare qualities replace those, and these rare qualities on their own are more powerful than one IQ skill. A Pokemon can only have one at a time. So per team, you're limited to only 3 rare qualities, so you need to decide which rare qualities are you gonna have. And all rare qualities were not made equal. There's some that will completely change the game, yet there's others that hardly notice at all. So let's stack them against each other. I'll be going in alphabetical order, not best to worst or worst to best or anything like that. Let's start with Bargain. This allows you to buy items at a lower price in dungeons only, not in town. Too situational. Item shops are pretty rare in the first place, and if you do find one, just think, is buying that one orb worth an entire rare quality slot? It's not. F. Blast Control. Damage you take from explosions is reduced. It's only useful in late game when blast traps and enemies with explosion exist, and even then, the likelihood that you're gonna come across a blast trap or an enemy with explosion is extremely rare. C. Brawl. The more enemies in the room, the more powerful your moves are. This one can be useful. It can save your tail in monster houses or in a large room where there happens to be 3 or 4 enemies, but unfortunately, this won't help you at all at boss fights because there's only one boss fight that has more than one enemy, and it's very early game and not a very hard fight, so I'll give it a C. You can use it sometimes. Defensive Rhythm. When hit by an attack, defenses are boosted for 1 turn. This one's okay. For long fights, especially in like boss fights when you're going to be taking many hits, a defense boost is pretty good. And even though it's only for 1 turn, in all likelihood you're going to be taking an attack the next turn anyway, so it'll keep your defenses boosted, so it has a use, and it's always applicable in every single fight, so B. Evasive Rhythm. Pretty much the exact same thing as Defensive Rhythm, except it boosts your evasion instead of your defense, but it accomplishes the same thing. It's more of an all or nothing than Defensive Rhythm though, so take your pick, it's about the same. B. Food Finder. More likely to find tiny apples in dungeons. When it says more likely, it means more likely. Almost 1 per room. I've seen 3 per room with this quality on. It can get annoying having your inventory fill up with tiny apples, and tiny apples aren't the best hunger food anyway. You have to eat 4 of them to fill up your entire hunger bar, so it'll get annoying pretty quick unless you start to purposefully pass up tiny apples, and at that point, why even have the rare quality? It's outclassed. B. Forge a Path. Break through walls at the cost of 1 hunger per wall. Very useful if you're stocked up on food, and it can be combined with other rare qualities that help your hunger, such as Food Finder, to be a nice combo. It can be used to escape a bad situation if you're stuck in a corner, or if you just want to find the stairs faster. A. Friendly. Pokemon you battle are more likely to become friends. Now I know a lot of people are probably going to think I'm rating this too highly, but I mean it when I say power and numbers in this game. More Pokemon means less attacks that each individual person on your team is going to take, and you can really treat the extra Pokemon you recruit in dungeons as expendable. So, A. Funnel Fun. Rate at which HP restores in corridors is increased. HP regen is always nice, but it won't necessarily turn fights in your favor. It's really just a low level but consistent buff. C. Leap Ahead. The Pokemon behind you can jump in front and use 1-tile moves in corridors. I'd recommend having 2 or 4 tile moves for most of your Pokemon in these situations anyway, but it can be useful if you're running out of PP with your long-range moves. B. Leave Half. When a Reviver Seed, Big Apple, or Max Elixir is used, it leaves a tiny Reviver Seed, Apple, or Max Ether in your bag. Great for long dungeons, with resource management and toolbox space. Only downside is that it requires you to have these relatively rare items in the first place, especially Reviver Seeds, since they're exceptionally scarce in this game compared to tiny Reviver Seeds, but it's still really good. A. Link boost. Linked moves are more powerful than the more moves are linked. This is one of the best qualities for boss fights, but in long dungeons, chances are you use a linked move and the enemy would be knocked out anyway, and I strongly recommend against having 3 or more moves linked, because you'll just run out of PP way too quick for the longer dungeons. Always bring a link box if you're using this one. B. Lonely Courage. When a Pokemon has no nearby teammates, they get stronger. You should always be in a full group unless you're in a dungeon that doesn't allow that, and even then, when you're in a dungeon alone, like Purity Forest, where you're only allowed 1 team member, there are better rare qualities to have that'll increase your survivability a lot more than this. C. Mind over Matter. Heals status effects when you land on Wonder Tiles. Status effects aren't very common in the first place, but it can be useful since both Poison and Burn are very dangerous in this game, a large buff from the originals. C. Moving up. Move experience earned is increased. Move levels aren't as influential as you'd think, and the Makihita Dojo is better for this anyway. F. Narrow Focus. Moves used in corridors never miss. This is incredibly powerful, especially when you combine it with multi-hit moves that have a very low accuracy. A good portion of fights are fought in corridors, so it'll be helping you out in every single dungeon no matter where you go. A. Notorious Fasting. No damage at 0 belly. HP won't restore at 0, and ghost Pokemon in walls will still take damage. HP regen is very important in this game. You'll be relying on Oran Berries all the time too heavily if you don't pay attention to your belly, and you can circumvent the whole belly problem by just swapping the leader anyway. F. Notorious Healing. Rate at which HP regens is increased. It's just a different version of Final Fun, and I know I just said that HP regen is very important, but you don't need a ton of HP regen. If you're that low, you can use an Oran Berry. C. Notorious Restoration. Items that restore HP or belly restore more. The HP restore here is only useful in very late game when you have over 100 HP, because that's how much an Oran Berry heals anyway. Even then, it's not that useful. Belly is okay, but it's outclassed by many other belly-saving rare qualities. C. PP Pouch. 1 PP is restored for every defeated enemy. This is good. You basically will ever have to worry about your PP. One-shots restore as much PP as used, and if you use, like say, for instance, Blizzard and knock out multiple enemies, you'll be restoring more PP than you used. You're saving so much on Max Elixirs and Max Ethers. S. Absolutely S. Rapid Bullseyes. Multi-hit moves will never miss. Seeing as multi-hit moves are already pretty much the most powerful moves in the game, this is great to have. Obviously you need a multi-hit move to benefit from it, but I'd recommend having one anyway. A. Recoil Boost. Moves that have recoil or hurt the user when they miss are boosted. I don't really recommend recoil moves because there's stronger moves that don't have recoil, so it's really only useful if you have Rockhead. Useful if you have Cubone as a starter because Cubone has Rockhead, but otherwise I couldn't recommend it. C. Riled Up. Attack stats are boosted after taking a hit. It's the offensive version of defensive rhythm, but for some reason they didn't make it so that they go back down after one turn, so they just outright made this one better. Whatever. A. Sales Pitch. Items can be sold at a higher price in dungeons. Money is important. This is the only one that I would recommend having on a Pokemon outside of your main team, because you could just hoard all these items, for instance, link boxes that sell for 650, and then take a foray into a dungeon with a Pokemon that has this rare quality and sell them all at once. Otherwise, you're not gonna need it for adventuring, you're not gonna need it for main story or anything serious. So even though I would recommend having it on a Pokemon outside of your team, that's not really what I'm testing for here. F. Shared Happiness. When a teammate's status is healed, the whole team's statuses are healed. You're almost never going to have more than one status effect on your team at one time. The only instance where I could think this would be very important is in probably the one point in your entire game save file that you will get hit with a Perish Song, which hits multiple enemies at the same time, and you have one heal seed. If you don't have a heal seed, this is useless, so F. Small Stomach. Any food fills your HP to full. This is the best hunger reducing rare quality. All those plain seeds that are piling up in your inventory because you've been using reviver seeds, they fill your stomach up to 100. Oran berries fill your stomach up to 100. The only thing that doesn't are max ethers and max elixirs, but any seed, any berry, full belly, pretty much eliminates the need for any kind of apple. Frees up inventory space for more important things. Oran berries have 2 uses now. S. Squad up. The more members you have, the higher your recruit rate. It's similar to friendly, and it's just about as useful. I've had runs of dungeons where I'm on floor 6, and I already have a full team of 8 because of this, so A. Squeeze out. PP of a move at 0 may be restored. It's the beggar's version of PP pouch. It's annoying to always have to be at 0 PP, and even then you'll only get 1 PP if it is restored, so that's dangerous anyway, but it's still useful for saving on max elixirs. B. Steamroll. Moves that are not very effective, or not effective at all, will do neutral damage. I'm gonna level with y'all. This is the best rare quality in the game. So let me explain type effectiveness and stab. Stab in this game has a 1.5 times multiplier. Super effectiveness has a 1.4 times multiplier, which means if you have a stab move and you have a super effective move that's not your stab, it's always better to use the stab move. Now imagine if your stab move was always neutral effective minimum. You don't need to make movesets for type effectiveness. You don't need to get move coverage. All you need to do is choose a few good moves that you have stab with. Like, you can use fury swipes on a ghost type. That's incredibly powerful. You can use double kick on a ghost type. All of these super powerful moves can be used on anything and be effective. It's a game changer. S. Strike back. When you take damage, lower attack and special attack of the enemy. It's the opposite of riled up, and like all the others, can turn fights, but it's reliant on you taking damage first. Doesn't help much when you're outnumbered, unlike the other ones that boost your own stats. B. Thrown item boost. Increases the power of thrown items. Enemies can't catch them either. Thrown items become pretty irrelevant pretty quickly, and it's not a very large boost to start with. But if you have a large stockpile of geopebbles, they're actually kind of useful. C. Tight formation. The more team members are nearby, the lower damage taken from wide-ranging moves. This is reliant on many things. A large team, an enemy that has a wide-ranging move, and you are all together. But in this specific situation, it is an absolute godsend. You don't want 2 or more of your team being wiped out by an earthquake or an earth power, and it pairs nicely with squad up. B. Wary walk. When the Pokemon steps on a trap, it may be broken and disabled. Listen, anything that nerfs traps is great in my book, but it's not gonna save your life very often. It's more just going to get rid of the annoyance of, oh, you're asleep for 3 turns. Especially if you always remember to check monster houses with the A button. B. XP boost. It's pretty obvious what this does. Gives you more experience. This is going to make the game a lot less tedious if you get it early on. Levels give you access to evolution, moves, power, survivability. Pretty overall good. A. And that does it for the tier list, although I will say the situations you can get into in this game are so diverse. It's possible that rare qualities that I used and didn't have any use for were useful for you. So if you had one of the lower tier rare qualities save your life, let me know in the comments. And obviously this is my opinion, so this is what I've experienced with the rare qualities. Sometimes I took it out on one dungeon and I hated it, so I changed it immediately. But that does it. Thank you for sitting all the way to the end. If this guide helped you a bit, maybe help you decide what you wanted to use for your main team, drop a like. I'd love that. See you all in the next video, and goodbye.